Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Chad here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today we've got another Firearms Fact episode for you. Today we're going to be getting into the ins and outs of DI versus piston operation. A lot of people tend to have some confusion over it, so hopefully this video will serve as a reference to hopefully some of you guys that are stumped can be pointed in the right direction on this whole thing. If you want to learn more about firearms technology, definitely check out SDI. They are a great group of people. They got some great programs at their school. They take GI Bill. If you want to go further down the rabbit hole, they're definitely a great resource to check out. So give them a look if that's something you want to look into. It's definitely worth checking out. So I guess I'm going to let Chad, in his own words, just give you a super brief and straight to the point explanation of the essential difference between these two different phenomenons that are happening here.
You know, you say DI, and I've had like direct injection for car engines on the brain because I've been working on cars the past few days. So that's all I can think about is direct injection. All right, so DI is direct gas impingement, okay? It's the common system that's associated with, like, the AR-15 is the most predominant firearm that's associated with direct gas impingement. So the main difference between DI and piston is that in a DI system, the expanding gases behind the projectile as the round is fired are picked up forward down the barrel, and then they are sent backwards, and then they are impinged on the action itself to cycle the firearm. On a piston system, the gases themselves are trapped in, say, a piston cup, and then a long rod or other mechanisms that we'll discuss further in this video, the gases are impinged upon that rod itself, and then the bolt carrier comes to the rear and the action cycles. No gas, save for the gases that just blow back during the action itself of firing, wind up in the receiver. That's one of the big differences between DI and piston as well, is that direct gas impingement systems, there's a lot of extra carbon deposits and such that wind up in the action of the firearm. With a piston system, typically they do run cleaner, but there are some exceptions for sure.
Yeah, so the common analogy that's given on a DI gun is that a DI gun poops in its own mouth. And it is true, okay? So with a DI, you can even separate DIs into a couple of different areas as well. All right, in front of me we have a AG-42 Jungmann. All right, the Jungmann is a direct gas impingement gun. It is a true direct gas impingement gun because the gases literally are directed directly against a cup on the bolt face. Okay, it can't get any more simple than that. Same thing with our French rifle down here, the MAS.
And oui.
Yep, that's a 49, Mass 49, whatever they call those things. I can't remember all my gun lingo, but the French rifle's the same way. Okay, it uses a long tube, and the gases are directly impinged literally against a cup in the front of the bolt face. Okay, so that's a true direct gas impingement. So, you know, all these people say, oh, Eugene Stoner, direct gas impingement, oh, the AR was so futuristic. I mean, don't get me wrong, the AR-15 was a pretty interesting invention. I mean, it's safe to say it's quite successful. Okay, it's a very common use rifle. However, it wasn't the first rifle to use direct gas impingement. So when we look at the AR-15, Chad.
So when we look at the AR-15, if you guys follow Tim over at Military Arms Channel, you know that he started a huge dumpster fire with some recent videos about the AR not being a true DI, which, technically speaking, it is not. The gas is picked up and it's run down a tube, okay, the gas tube here, but it impinges upon a piston area inside of the bolt carrier group itself. So you have a separate bolt and a separate carrier, and there are piston rings, the gas rings, that trap the gas and then allow the action to delay and unlock. So in the truest sense of the difference between direct impingement and piston, this is kind of a combination of the two systems, and the AR and just its bare bone operation has been very reliable over the years. It's really come to fruition, and it's really a great system. I mean, the guys over at InRange do these mud tests on various rifles, and the AR has trumped nearly everything. It's like, oh, we'll just put some mud on the thing. Oh, it'll choke up. Pfft. the AK lost to this.
Yeah,
system.
definitely check out Ian and Carl. They're great dudes.
But Tim did a very, very detailed video with Chase over there at Copper Custom and all, and they have a lot of information about this system itself. We won't really go into detail, but just know that this is a combination of the two systems in its truest form.
All right, so now we'll go down the rabbit hole of piston systems, okay?
Oh, boy.
So with piston systems, you can get away with a pretty good bit, okay, in terms of how they're made. There's a lot of different ways to trap that gas, okay? But the basic premise behind a piston system is that the gas stays out of the action. That's important for a couple of reasons, okay? One reason is because, obviously, it's going to make the system run cleaner over a longer period of time. Now, a lot of people, depending on the piston system in question, don't like piston systems because they don't suppress quite as well. Okay,
Well,
it just depends. But what I'm
we have
saying
some
is,
exceptions to that too.
I can suppress this AK, right? But what do I have to deal with?
Yep.
That's loud, right?
Not only that, but also the excess gas in most piston systems is expelled through little ports that are in the system itself. Once the cup of the piston extends past that point when it's going at its full rearward momentum, the excess gas isn't needed in the system, so it expels out of the front, and it's a phenomenon that's commonly known as piston pop.
Right.
And on certain rifles, especially probably like the AUG, the Steyr AUG is the worst example I can think of with this, but it has very horrendous piston pop, and being such a short platform, it is extremely loud, suppressed at the ear. It's ridiculous.
We're going to get on that in a little bit here in terms of the suppression. Now, with this system is a long stroke gas piston, all right, because you have a large piece of reciprocating mass whereby the piston is attached directly to the carrier. And if you think about it, Mikhail Kalashnikov, when he designed this, he was a tank commander and an engineer and a bit of a mechanic. So he thought, okay, well, I'm just going to make a really simple machine, right? So how do cars work? Those pistons going up and down and that exert rotational axis, okay? Same type of thing. All we're worried about is linear axis of travel with gas being exacted against this cup, okay? And it's got a relatively loose fit. So it's not a very efficient system in the AK, but it's made that way so that it's really, you know, can handle a lot of abuse and not being cleaned well and copper buildup and all kind of crap, which we've proved in other videos. AKs, you know, pretty good system. So you have a long stroke gas piston. Then you can get down to the rabbit hole of all different kinds of different systems. Then you have what would fall into the category of a short stroke gas piston, whereby you use short tappets or short gas systems such as the M1 carbine. M1A is another good example. M14 also uses essentially a short tappet system. So with this system, the carrier is this long piece of reciprocating mass, not unlike the AK, but instead of the gases exerting directly against the carrier, okay, on an M14.
Op
rod, okay, M1 Garand would be technically long stroke.
Technically.
Because it's just that big, huge op rod, but the M14 and the M1 carbine use just a tappet system. It's literally just a little puck in there that pushes back and forth.
It just seals the gas and then traps it, and there you go.
Yeah, and it's a really simple kind of thing, right? So then getting a little bit down a different end of the rabbit hole, you might have a short tappet system, and the Sega 12. The Sega 12 essentially uses a very similar type of gas system to the M14 and M1 carbine, whereby it uses just a little puck. In fact, this one's dirty, so you're not going to hear it probably, but it's dirty.
It's a little
but when a Sega 12 is clean, you'll hear that tappet moving back and forth in there's a little puck, okay? And that puck captures the gas and then exerts a lot of force directly against the front of the long stroke op rod. Now, the weird thing about that is the Sega 12 still uses an AK style op rod though, okay? And that's the strange thing that a lot of people tend to not consider. It's a shotgun, okay? It's a 12 gauge. You still have that area, okay? But I believe what they were running into is they were having problems getting these things to cycle, just picking up the gas right on the cup of the piston. They had to use a puck system to capture the gas to have more surface area on the front of the puck to make it push back harder, and then it actuates against it.
It's all about gas volume too, because shotgun shells are a low pressure cartridge more or less, and that's why the gas system itself, like the gas block on Sega shotguns and other semi-automatic shotguns, is so large because it's like a high volume, low pressure setup, whereas on a rifle you'll have a smaller gas block and gas area and cup because you're at a higher pressure, lower volume.
So that's a perfect place for us to talk about suppressing these systems. Now, you know, the cool thing about a DI system versus a piston systems are cool because of the way they capture gas. All right, now, this isn't exactly a cutaway. Now, this is one of our uppers from our meltdown, all right? We melted down one of the Alexander Arms piston uppers here. But you can see that there's a cup that is actuated against, you know, an op rod, and the gas is generally captured in this area. But we also, what do we have? An adjustment. We can adjust the amount of gas flow and really control exactly what gas is being introduced to the system. So for suppressing purposes, pistons are awesome because it gives you a lot of flexibility to adjust the gas block. Now, when you get into a DI, you get into maybe just a little bit more complexity in terms of getting the system to run at peak performance when you're trying to suppress it. However, Chad has a little more experience with that. I'll let him elaborate.
So the big thing with suppressing systems between, you know, DI and a piston is slowing down bolt thrust. Okay, when you put a traditional suppressor on the end of a rifle, typically you're going to get what's called back pressure. Back pressure increases the rearward momentum of that gas. It's traveling faster. So to slow that down in a traditional like AR, for example, that uses a DI system, a combination system, you normally would run either like a heavier spring, a heavier buffer, or a combination thereof the two. In some rifles, you could have an adjustable gas block. Like I've got in several rifles, I have the Superlative Arms adjustable DI blocks, and they can either restrict the gas flow or they can do what's called bleed it off, and then bleed off the excess gas out the front. And I've found that certain rifles suppress better than others with a piston system, honestly. The Superlative Arms piston system uses a long piston rod, and it has the cup built into the end of it. And basically the gas just gets picked up and it exerts pressure on the cup, pushes the entire rod, and then that hits the bolt carrier itself and sends the bolt and carrier to the rear and cycles action. However, since you're not getting all that excess gas flowing out of the flow ports in the carrier itself, like on a DI system, you get this puff of gas out of there where the excess gas is expelled right there by your face, therefore increasing the sound pressure levels at the ear. The piston system, the Superlative Arms specifically, is quieter at the ear in all of the testing that I've done, which is really cool. And it's a lot cleaner too. Like Eric mentioned earlier, the piston systems run a lot cleaner. Just because you don't have all that gas coming back into the action. And also, if you've seen in some of the meltdown videos where we've used the thermal footage, between the DI setups and the piston setups, you can clearly see that heat flow doesn't make it back to the receiver and the action as fast as it does in the DI systems. It stays a lot cooler, and you can clearly see the evidence of that in the meltdowns, which is really cool.
Our tests have clearly proven that heat destroys a gun. Enough heat, enough friction, and that heat and enacting itself against the firearm for long enough, you're going to start melting things, you're going to start drawing temper, you're going to start getting the barrel to droop, the system to just tear itself apart. So heat is the enemy when it comes to how these firearms operate. So I guess the big question that we'll end with on this video is, which system's better, DI or a piston system? I think that both systems serve a essential role depending on what you're trying to do. It is a tool-specific type of camp that you come to, okay? DIs are great. One thing that's nice about DI is the recoil impulse is super, super nice. I mean, shooting an AR, it's just such, they purr like a kitten. They just do not have any recoil, so you do get less recoil out of a DI system. And especially in a rifle length system, when those gases are expanding violently, rapidly, and everything, but they are cooling and they are slowing, and it is a less violent expansion of gas over a period of time versus a shorter gas tube that has to get that gas in there really quick. There's not as much time for that to occur. So, they have such a nice recoil impulse on a rifle length system. They're not without their maintenance requirements. You do need to make sure you keep them clean and keep them well serviced. But, you know, I would see a piston system maybe running a heck of a lot longer without maintenance. So if that is a concern of yours and you're not concerned about recoil impulse, maybe you want to suppress a gun as well. Maybe it's a hunting rifle that you take out and hunt pigs with every weekend, and you only want to clean it every couple of months or something. You can probably get away with that.
Yeah. Big takeaways for me, just the main comparisons and contrast, mainly contrast. DI systems are typically less expensive, especially in like AR-15s. Less moving parts, less to worry about. You literally have a gas tube and then your standard bolt carrier in an AR. With a piston system, you've got a different gas block. You have the piston cup itself, an actuator rod, if that's the way it's set up. Plus, you have a special carrier that has, instead of a gas key on the top of it, you just have a solid machine block for that piston to actuate upon. Typically, those systems are definitely more expensive.
They are.
That's one big thing. But certain rifles, you know, they were really designed from the ground up with one system in mind. I mean, take like the FAL, for example. It's always been a piston rifle, you know, and it's just rugged dependability, ultra reliability, you know, just great setup. I couldn't imagine a rifle like an FAL being a direct gas impingement, but you look at the AG-42, and it's been stellar. We've never had a single problem out of these rifles, and the Hakims and the what's the little 7.62?
Rashid.
The Rashid uses the same system as well because they were all based off of the same design by Eric Eklund.
And it works.
It works great. But the biggest things really, like we mentioned, cost, reliability. Piston systems typically could be seen as being a little bit more reliable in the long run without preventative maintenance. They can go a lot longer most of the time without routine cleaning than a DI system. But if you take care of a DI system, especially an AR, it'll serve you forever.
I have one more thing to add to this discussion, and we'll let you guys get back to your day. You cannot deny reciprocating mass. Mm-hmm. There's no such thing as a free lunch in physics. And when you look at the SCAR is one of my favorite rifles. I love it. But it has a humongous, like, 2-pound bolt carrier, okay? And that reciprocating mass, you know, you cannot, there's no such thing as a free lunch in physics. You know, you have to deal with it. When that heavy reciprocating mass moving back and forth, you know, it does have a bit of recoil. It kicks harder than a lot of 308s might kick. And then also, it beats up optics because a lot of people think, oh, well, that bolt comes to the rear and it stops, right? Oh, well, that's what's destroying the optic. No, it's when it comes to a rest as it goes forward that destroys the optic. So some systems will pound the crap out of your optics, and the SCAR is one of those. I love the SCAR platform. It is a wonderful rifle. They're accurate. They're reliable. You know, they've got a suppressor setting. They suppress quite well. And man, they're just wonderful rifles, but they're not without their quirks. So don't think that just because you drop $4 grand on a rifle that all of a sudden, oh, it's the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, the SCAR is cool, but it does beat up optics. And it's something to consider. You've got to put a robust optic on a SCAR because you can't deny the reciprocating mass of that huge piston carrier, okay? Guys, thanks for watching today's video. We hope you enjoyed it. We love making these types of videos. We definitely want to take a moment to thank all of our Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. All the folks who purchase man cans or shirts, merchandise over on the website, all those funds go right back into supporting the channel. Thank you guys so very much for the support. Thanks for watching. We hope you learned something. Many more videos on the way. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.